I always thought I knew what betrayal felt like. A sharp, clean cut from a stranger. I was wrong. True betrayal is a slow, internal bleed from someone you thought was part of your own body. My name is Alex, and for 10 years, my world was built on two pillars. My wife, Sophia, and my best friend, Jake. We were a trio, a perfectly balanced ecosystem of trust and laughter. Sophia's gentle creativity complemented my steadiness, and Jake's bold ambition pushed us all to be better. He was the brother I never had, the best man at my wedding, the first person I called with any news, good or bad. The first fissure in my perfect world was almost invisible. It started with Sophia's phone. It became an appendage, constantly buzzing with a secret life. She'd smile at the screen, a soft, private smile that had once been reserved for me. When I'd enter the room, the phone would be flipped over. The smile would vanish, replaced by a distracted air. Just work stuff, she'd say, her voice a little too light. My trust in her was a solid, unshakable thing, so I buried my unease. Then Jake began to drift. Our weekly basketball games, a sacred ritual since college, were canceled with increasing frequency. Swamped at the new job, buddy, he'd say, his voice crackling with a strange excitement over the phone. I was proud of his success at Omnitech, a prestigious tech firm. I bragged about him to my colleagues. The collapse happened on a rainy Tuesday. I'd returned early from a business trip, eager to surprise Sophia with flowers. The house was silent, the only light coming from the living room. I found her on the sofa, curled into a ball, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My heart plummeted. I thought of accidents, of illness, of a death in the family. I rushed to her, the flowers forgotten on the floor. Sophia, what's wrong? Talk to me? I pleaded, pulling her into my arms. She stiffened and pushed me away, her face a mask of agony and shame. The words that followed didn't make sense. They were foreign, impossible syllables. It's Jake, she choked out, her eyes unable to meet mine. We're in love. The room tilted. The two pillars of my life had not just crumbled. They had collided, and the impact vaporized everything I knew. I moved out that night. I packed a single bag, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind floated somewhere near the ceiling, watching the scene unfold. I couldn't breathe the air in that house. It was thick with their deception. I rented a sterile, furnished apartment that smelled of bleach and loneliness. The silence, there was a physical presence, heavy and accusatory. In the quiet, my mind became a torture chamber, replaying every suspicious moment from the last 6 months. Jake canceling our game to help Sophia with a flat tire. Sophia buying a new dress for a girls' night, I later learned never happened. The late nights they both had, their stories perfectly aligned. I had been a blind fool, a trusting chump. The pain was a raw, open wound, but beneath it, something else was born. It wasn't the hot, screaming rage of a bar fight. It was a cold, precise and patient anger. It settled in my bones, a new core of frozen steel. They hadn't just stolen my wife. They had stolen my best friend, my confidant, my sense of reality. They had taken my trust and used it as a weapon against me. A simple confrontation would be useless. It would only give them drama, a reason to paint me as the unstable ex. No, I wouldn't give them that. If they wanted to play in the shadows, I would become the darkness itself. Jake loved two things above all else: his glittering career and his carefully crafted image as the golden boy. I decided I would systematically dismantle both. The first practical step was a lawyer. The divorce proceedings would be the public battlefield, and I needed a general. I found one in Ms. Miller, a woman with the sharp eyes of a hawk and a voice that could freeze hell. She was unsympathetic to my pain but fiercely interested in my assets. Gather evidence of the affair, she instructed, her pen tapping on a legal pad. But more importantly, we need to secure your financial future. The process felt cold and clinical, but it gave me a structure, a to-do list for the apocalypse. While Ms. Miller handled the legal front, I began my own private investigation. I needed to understand the enemy. Jake's life was his work. Omnitech was known for its ruthless efficiency and its strict, uncompromising code of ethics. I remembered a night years ago, after one too many beers. Jake had bragged about a project, the Granite Project. He'd lowered his voice, a gleam in his eye. The client paid for premium components, he'd said. I used the standard grade, pocketed the company an extra 50 grand. They gave me a bonus and a promotion. Sometimes you have to be bold, Alex. At the time, I dismissed it as drunken bravado. Now it shone like a beacon. That was the crack. That was where I would drive the wedge. I just needed proof. I couldn't do this alone. I needed an ally, someone with skills I lacked. I thought of Mike, a friend from my college days. Mike was a quiet, brilliant guy who worked in cybersecurity. We had lost touch, but when I called him and laid out the sordid tale, there was no hesitation. Tell me what you need, he said, his voice grim. I needed access. I needed the digital ghost of Jake's treachery, emails, server logs, project reports. Mike explained the risks. Hacking was out of the question. The digital trails were too easy to follow. But he had a contact, a disgruntled IT administrator at Omnitech named Leo. Leo felt overlooked and underpaid. Mike thought he could be persuaded, for a significant financial incentive, to look the other way while certain files were copied. It was a risk, but it was a calculated one. I liquidated a small investment portfolio my father had left me. The money was a small price to pay for justice. A week later, Mike met me in a quiet parking garage and handed me a small, unmarked storage drive. It's all there, he said. The Granite Project and others. Be smart, Alex. The contents of the drive were a revelation. It was a window into Jake's professional soul, and it was corrupt. I spent days immersed in the data, cross-referencing project numbers, cost analyses, and internal communications. I felt like an archaeologist uncovering a lost city of lies. And there it was, in black and white, an email chain between Jake and his project manager. Jake, using technical jargon, explicitly recommended sourcing a lower-grade component for the Granite Project, citing supply chain issues. The client was billed for the premium part. The cost difference was exactly what he had boasted about. But it didn't stop there. I found two other projects with the same pattern. Project Chimera and Project Minotaur. Jake had a system. He was a parasite, feeding on client overpayments to make himself look like a financial wizard. His performance reviews glowed with praise for his cost-saving initiatives. This was more than just cutting corners. It was systematic fraud. This evidence was my nuclear weapon. But I couldn't just launch it. A direct, anonymous email to his boss would be traced back to a data breach, and Leo would be implicated. I had to be smarter. I had to make Omnitech discover the cancer themselves. I had to be the whisper in the ear of the doctor. I became a ghost in the machine. I created a free, encrypted email account on a public computer at the Central Library. I crafted my message with the care of a novelist. I wrote as a concerned Omnitech employee, deeply troubled by the erosion of ethical standards. I didn't name Jake. Instead, I pointed a shaky, anonymous finger at the Granite Project. I described the discrepancy between the build components and the installed ones. I suggested this was not an isolated incident, but a pattern that warranted a full internal audit by the ethics committee. I attached a single, carefully sanitized document, a cost comparison sheet for the Granite Project with all identifying names and project codes removed. It was just enough to raise alarm bells, but not enough to identify the source. I sent the email and felt a cold thrill. The first domino had been tipped. An internal investigation once sparked would be like a bloodhound. It would find the scent in Jake's own emails, in his own arrogant words. He was going to be condemned by his own hand. While the corporate machinery began to grind, I turned my attention to the human front. Sophia. The love I felt for her was now a tangled knot of pain, longing, and fury. She called me, her voice thick with tears. "It's a mess, Alex," she cried. He's so intense. He's talking about us moving in together already. It's all happening so fast." I could hear the panic in her voice. The fantasy was crumbling under the weight of reality. I became her port in the storm. I didn't beg. I didn't get angry. I practiced a performance of serene, understanding friendship. I met her for coffee, listening as she unspooled her confusion. "He's so stressed about work all of a sudden," she confessed, stirring her latte anxiously. "He says there's some kind of investigation. He's paranoid." I nodded, my face a mask of sympathy. "That sounds really tough for him," I said, my voice dripping with false concern. Inside, I was ice. The plan was working. I was subtly repositioning myself as the stable, safe harbor, while Jake was becoming the source of chaos and anxiety. The investigation at Omnitech exploded faster than I had anticipated. Jake called me, his voice a frantic, high-pitched thing I barely recognized. "Alex, man, you're not going to believe this. Someone is trying to destroy me. The ethics committee is crawling all over my projects. They've suspended me." I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Jake, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding," I said, layering my voice with feigned reassurance. "You're their top performer. They're probably just being thorough." He was too panicked to hear the satisfaction beneath my words. His suspension was my cue to escalate. I returned to the library and my ghost email account. I sent a second message to the ethics committee. This one was more pointed. I suggested they look not just at the project costs, but at the personal financial incentives, the bonuses and promotions awarded for these specific fraudulent cost savings. I knew Jake had received a $20,000 bonus for the Granite project alone. Connecting his personal gain directly to the fraud made it no longer a questionable business practice, but a clear case of embezzlement. I was building the case for them brick by anonymous brick. The fall was swift and public. Jake wasn't just fired. He was terminated for gross misconduct. A security guard escorted him from the building in front of his stunned colleagues. The news rippled through the tech industry with shocking speed. The rising star of Omnitech had been a fake. Headhunters who had once clamored for his attention now blocked his number. His reputation was a smoking crater. He called me, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's over, Alex. My career is over. No one will ever hire me again." I listened, making sympathetic noises, offering him the shoulder to cry on that he had once offered me. It was the ultimate manipulation. Meanwhile, Sophia was watching the drama unfold from the front row. The confident, powerful man she had left me for was revealed to be a fraud, both professionally and, she was starting to see, personally. He became bitter, snapping at her, accusing her of being a burden. The cracks in their fantasy relationship were widening into chasms. With his career in ashes, it was time to demolish his personal life. I needed him to do the work for me. I met him for a drink at a dimly lit bar. He was already 3 whiskeys in, his eyes glassy with self-pity. The conversation meandered through his misery until I gently steered it toward Sophia. "How are things with you too, with all this stress?" I asked innocently. It was like turning a key. The floodgates opened. He began to blame her. If she hadn't been so clingy, so demanding of my time, I might have been more focused at work. He slurred, his face twisting with contempt. "She's not the woman I thought she was. This was all a mistake." He went on, vilifying the woman for whom he had destroyed my life. It was a beautiful, ugly symphony of his own toxicity. I kept my phone on my lap, its voice memo app silently recording every damning word. The next day, I invited Sophia over to my apartment. I made her tea and let her talk. She was fragile, lost. She confessed she didn't know what to do. Then, with the perfect timing of a stage director, I said, "Sophia, I'm worried he's not who you think he is. I heard something. Something I think you need to hear." I took out my phone. "This is going to hurt," I warned softly, and pressed play. The recording filled the quiet room. Jake's voice, sloppy and venomous. Clingy. A mistake. Not the woman I thought she was. I watched the color drain from her face. She listened to the entire thing, her body rigid, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. When it ended, she was silent for a full minute. Then a single ragged sob escaped her. The sound was of a final illusion shattering. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a horrified clarity. "He never loved me," she whispered. "He just wanted to win." The recording was the final blow. Sophia packed her bags and left Jake's apartment that very night. He called her, frantic, but she sent his calls to voicemail. He called me, confused and angry, but I was suddenly overwhelmed with work. He was completely isolated, a leper in his own life. I would see him sometimes through the window of a cafe, sitting alone, staring into a cold cup of coffee. The swagger was gone, replaced by a permanent slump of defeat. I had systematically taken everything from him. His job, his reputation, and now the woman he had stolen. The circle was complete. Sophia, with nowhere else to go, moved into my spare room. I was the hero, the rescuer, the stable rock in her turbulent world. She saw the life she had thrown away, the order, the kindness, the genuine care. The contrast with Jake's collapse was stark and damning. She was filled with a gut-wrenching remorse, and I, the magnanimous victor, offered her shelter and a facade of friendship. She lived with me for a month. We fell into a haunting parody of our old life, shared meals, quiet evenings. But the ghost of her betrayal hung between us. One night, she came into the living room where I was reading. She sat close to me, her eyes soft with regret and hope. "Alex, I'm so sorry," she breathed, and leaned in to kiss me. I turned my head. Her lips brushed my cheek. "I can't, Sophia," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "The trust is gone. It's over." The tears that followed were real this time, not performative. She wasn't crying for the loss of me, but for the realization of what her actions had truly cost her. A week later, she found a small apartment and moved out. We promised to be friends, but it was a hollow formality. The door on that part of my life was closed, locked, and boarded up. With the drama over, I focused on rebuilding Alex. I joined a gym, channeling my cold anger into physical exertion. I reconnected with Mike, properly this time, not as a co-conspirator but as a friend. I thanked him for his help. He had been the only one who knew the full extent of my plan. I immersed myself in my work, and my clear-headed focus led to a promotion and a significant raise. My life was accelerating, while Jake's was in reverse. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he'd been forced to move back into his parents' house. A man in his 40s living in his teenage bedroom. The image was a darkly satisfying epilogue to his story. Occasionally, in a quiet moment, a sliver of doubt would pierce my conscience. Had I become a monster? But then I would vividly recall the physical sensation of my world disintegrating in that living room. The look on Sophia's face as she confessed. "He didn't just take my wife. He annihilated my best friend and my faith in people." My actions weren't about petty revenge. They were about restoring a balance, about delivering a consequence so severe, he would never be able to forget the price of such a betrayal. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Jake at a supermarket. He was pushing a cart with his mother, looking diminished and aged. He saw me and flinched, quickly looking down at the cereal boxes. I could have walked past, but I didn't. I steered my cart towards him. "Jake," I said, my voice neutral. He looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and shame. "Alex." He mumbled my name like a curse. "How have you been?" I asked, the banality of the question itself a kind of weapon. He just shook his head, unable to form a sentence. His mother looked from him to me, her expression a complex mix of sadness and dawning understanding. She knew. She knew her son was not the victim he claimed to be. I gave her a slight, respectful nod and pushed my cart away, leaving them in the aisle. I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity. He was simply a stranger now, a lesson I had learned from and moved beyond. I started dating again, tentatively. Trust was a language I had to relearn. Then I met Maria. She was a history teacher, with a calm, grounded presence and a laugh that felt genuine. She had no connection to my past. We took things slowly. She was patient with my walls, and she slowly, carefully, helped me dismantle them. She showed me that honesty wasn't a rare commodity. It was the foundation she built her life on. After several months, I knew I had to tell her. I took her to a quiet park and laid out the entire story. The affair, the betrayal, the cold, calculated revenge. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her about the storage drive, the fake emails, the secret recording. She listened without interruption, her hand in mine. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she squeezed my hand. "What he did was unforgivable," she said finally. "And what you did was severe. But I understand the why. I'm just sorry you had to go through that, and that you felt you had to become that person to survive it." Her empathy was a balm. It was the absolution I didn't know I needed. My life with Maria was a different world. It was built on transparency and shared values. We moved in together after a year, and the apartment that had once been a lonely cell became a home filled with light and books and music. The ghosts of Sophia and Jake were finally exorcised. Then, a letter arrived. It was from Sophia. She was engaged to a man from another state and was moving. She wrote that she was truly happy for the first time and hoped I had found peace. She apologized one last time. I wrote a brief, polite reply, wishing her well in her new life. I felt nothing but a distant hope that she had, indeed, found what she was looking for. The chapter was definitively closed. Mike and I still meet for coffee every month. Our conversations have evolved. We talk about his kids, my life with Maria, our hopes for the future. He's a successful business owner now, and he once told me that watching Jake's fall taught him a profound lesson about the non-negotiable nature of integrity. "I saw what happened when someone built a house on sand," he said. "I decided my foundation would be rock." It was a strange, unintended consequence of my vengeance. It had reinforced another man's moral compass. One sunny afternoon, he asked me the direct question. "Knowing what you know now, would you do it all again?" I looked out the window at the people living their ordinary, unbetrayed lives. I thought about the cold focus, the secret meetings, the calculated manipulation. "Yes," I said, my voice firm, "but I would have let myself heal faster afterward. I would have understood sooner that the best part of the revenge wasn't his destruction, but my own liberation." Maria and I married in a small, outdoor ceremony surrounded by a small circle of true friends. Mike was my best man. As I stood at the makeshift altar, watching her walk towards me, I felt a profound sense of closure. The bitter, heartbroken man from years ago was a faded photograph. I had not just survived. I had evolved. I had used the poison of betrayal to fuel a transformation, emerging wiser, stronger, and with a much clearer understanding of what truly mattered. I vowed my vows to Maria with a conviction that came from knowing the cost of their opposite. I vowed to protect our union, not with secrecy, but with radical honesty. Our wedding day was the true, beautiful ending to the story that began with a devastating confession on a rainy night. It was the happy ending I had believed was stolen from me forever. Years bloomed into a decade. Maria and I were blessed with 2 children, a thoughtful boy named Leo and a spirited girl named Clara. Our home was a delightful chaos of laughter, skinned knees, and school projects. One day, while reading industry news on my laptop, a small headline caught my eye: "Former Omnitech WizKids consulting firm folds." The article was a few paragraphs detailing Jake's failed attempt to start his own business. It mentioned his past at Omnitech and his subsequent bankruptcy. His past was a chain he could not break. I felt a faint, distant pang of something, not quite pity, more a weary acknowledgement of cause and effect. He had chosen a path of deception, and that path had led him here. I had chosen a path of ruthless reclamation, and it had led me to a sun-drenched kitchen, listening to my children argue about pancakes. We had both planted seeds and reaped the harvest. I closed the browser tab and never searched for his name again. He was finally, completely a ghost. I took my son, Leo, to his first baseball practice. He was all limbs and nervous energy, struggling to connect with the ball. I saw another father, patient and encouraging, working with his son who was a natural. In that moment, I saw the father I wanted to be, not one defined by a past of vengeance, but one focused on building up, on nurturing, on patience. The energy I had once poured into destruction was now a reservoir for construction. I thought of Jake again, wondering if he had a family, if he had children. I wondered what lessons he would teach them. Would he teach them to look for the easy angle, to win at any cost? Or had his fall been great enough to teach him the value of a clear conscience? For the sake of any innocent children in his life, I truly hoped he had learned, that he had found a way to build something real, even from the rubble. When my daughter Clara started school, she came home one day, her little face crumpled. A friend had lied to her about a playdate, choosing to play with someone else. Her small world was rocked by this first taste of betrayal. My heart ached with a familiar, yet distant, echo. I sat with her on her bed and told her a story. I told her about a man who had a friend who told a very big, very hurtful lie. I simplified it, removed the romance and the business dealings. I told her that lies are like cracks in a beautiful vase. They might not break it all at once, but they weaken it forever. I told her that the most powerful thing she could be was a person of her word, a true friend who valued honesty above the easy lie. She listened, her big, serious eyes fixed on mine, absorbing the lesson it had taken me a world-shattering betrayal to learn. She hugged me and said, "I'll always tell the truth, Daddy." It was the greatest reward I could have ever received. My life now is a tapestry woven with the threads of family, love, and purposeful work. The anger is a fossil, a relic from a different geological age of my life. The pain is a scar, smooth, white, and numb, a reminder of a wound that healed strong. I am grateful for the life I have, for Maria, for my children. I am even, in a twisted way, grateful for the betrayal. It was the fire that tempered me. It burned away my naivete and forced me to evaluate my own strength, my own capacity for both darkness and light. I am a man who can appreciate the profound peace of a happy marriage because I have known the hell of a broken one. I am a man who can protect his family with fierce determination because I know exactly what it feels like to have your family stolen from you. The experience didn't break me. It forged me. I am in the later chapters of my life now. My hair is more silver than brown. Maria and I sit on our porch in the evenings, her hand in mine, watching the colors of the sunset bleed into the horizon. We talk about our journey, the milestones, the small, precious moments. We have no regrets. We built a life, not on the ruins of my past, but on a new, solid foundation we laid together, brick by honest brick. I sometimes think of that younger version of myself, the man who received the news that would define the next few years of his life. I feel a deep compassion for him. He was so lost, so utterly destroyed. But I am also proud of him. He was faced with an abyss, and instead of falling in, he used its darkness as a cloak, gathered his resources, and fought his way back to the light. He was hurt, but he was not defeated. So this is my story. It is a story of a deep betrayal by two people who were my entire world. My best friend thought he could take what was mine, my wife, my trust, my peace. He believed his charm and ambition made him superior. He was mistaken. I did not confront him with my fists. I outmaneuvered him with his own weapons. I used his greed to ruin the career he worshipped, and I used his own cruel words to destroy the relationship he thought he had won. But in the final analysis, this story is not about Jake or even Sophia. It is my story. It is the story of how I navigated the worst pain a person can feel and emerged not just intact, but stronger. It is about how I reclaimed my power, my future, and my soul. He is a dark, formative chapter in my history, a lesson in the cost of treachery. So I put the question to you. If you stood in my shoes, your world in ashes at your feet, what would you have done? Would you have turned the other cheek and walked away? Or would you have ensured, with cold and calculated precision, that the architect of your misery paid a price so high he would spend the rest of his life counting the cost?
If you enjoyed this story of epic revenge, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, and make sure to subscribe for more tales of calculated justice, revenge or karma, and let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Click the arrow button to watch more interesting stories. Please note, your support helps keep the lights on and the stories coming. Thank you.